everybody, and welcome to Transfigure Nation. Tonight we're going to be talking with Vanessa at Suddenly Vanessa. She's full of high energy, so I imagine that this is going to be an exciting interview. At least I hope so. So let's get her on. Here we go. She is requested. Fabulous. Welcome and good evening. I apologize for the delayed start. We had an open house at my school, so that's what I've been doing. And here she is. Speak of the devil, and you can't get rid of her. Vanessa.
You can get rid of me. But like, why would you want to?
Exactly. Why would I want to? I have no idea. So, Vanessa, go ahead. Introduce yourself to all these wonderful people that are going to be watching this.
Oh my goodness. All right. So my name is Vanessa, obviously. I am a transgender woman. She, her pronouns. I have been on HRT for just a couple days over 16 months. So woohoo, approaching that year and a half. I know, it's fun. And I've been full-time everywhere but work over a year, and full-time including work for about 4 or 5 months. My family's known as trans for only maybe a year and a half or so, not quite 2 years, and I have only known or accepted myself for about 2.5 years. So,
okay, well, that's it then. She's answered all my questions before we even got started, so I guess that's going to be a good part. Okay, so you briefly touched on it, on basically everything. But we're going to get into depth because you, my dear, are a puzzle wrapped inside a mystery, inside of an enigma, or whatever the saying is, and you need to explain yourself. So, let us start. So, you talked a bit of, you've got to do the cool shades. Hold on. Let's
still up there? But they're cute, so I'm going to keep them. I just realized in my little video, I was like, oh wait, I still have my sunglasses up there. They're like all night, apparently.
Because it's so bright outside for you. I get it.
No, it's just an accessory. It's fine.
And just so everybody knows, she's in the same time zone as I am. And just so you have an idea, see, that's outside. It's not light out. Okay. I get it. You do what you do. You want whatever accessories you want. You go ahead and wear it. Now, let's get to the real point of this whole thing. Transfigure Nation, the project of all projects that is growing every day. Tell me, when was it, have you always understood yourself to be female? Have you always understood yourself to be, transgender? Or if you didn't understand the term transgender when you were younger, how did you rationalize your identity?
No, I didn't always know. It's one of those really dumb things where you realize just how dense I am. So growing up, I always thought it would be so cool if I was born female, but I wasn't, so I guess I'll just deal. And then growing up, it was like my sisters had the coolest clothes, and I made friends with girls really easily, and I did not get along with boys, and I kind of wanted to do the fun girl things, but that's fine, I'll do the boy things. I do enough like boy things or whatever, like we're gendering activities, which we shouldn't, but we do, because society. And I played with Legos and all that, but I didn't, like when it came to action figures, I didn't want action figures. Like my sister had cool Barbies, and those were cool, but I'm not allowed to play with those. I'm not allowed to play with those, because those are her toys. But I could play with Legos. That was acceptable. And so I, built worlds and whatever and did my own thing. But the whole time I remember thinking things like, as my, I didn't interact with my older sister a lot growing up. I have 3 siblings. And I have an older sister, a younger sister, and a younger brother. And, like, I remember my older sister, for example, had a pool, and just thinking, like, her bathing suits are super cool. Mine are just dumb shorts. And it's just stupid stuff like that, like, all throughout my life. Of course, I was definitely taught, like, you are a boy, and so you do boy things, and that is just how it is. And it wasn't even, like, given to me as an option. It wasn't given to me as a possibility, a thing I could see that I could do. And so it was just like, well, this sucks. I got the short end of the stick. But I guess I'll deal with boredom. And so I just sort of repressed a lot of those feelings. I often like to say that, like, I'm transgender without dysphoria.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, as I reflect on life, I realize that my dysphoria just didn't look like typical dysphoria, right? That yearning to be female, that yearning to do like girly things, and like I want to be pretty, I want to wear cute clothes. Boy clothes are stupid. Boy clothes are like a t-shirt and jeans. I know those are comfortable and easy.
No choice whatsoever. Yeah, I totally feel you there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you bring up an interesting point about dysphoria, and you say that you're trans without dysphoria, but again, it's how we define dysphoria. There's so many ways of looking at it. For me personally, my dysphoria came in the fact that I was always so feminine. I always was feminine. This is how I was all the time, folks. I was blessed. But I actually was made to feel, I was told that, oh, you're too skinny, you look like a girl, you walk like a girl. And I'm like, thanks, because I knew I was supposed to be upset at it, but I wasn't. So my dysphoria actually came from the fact that I wasn't upset that I didn't look more masculine, if that makes sense. So I think dysphoria is a weird definition,
Well, it's funny you should say that. So I got the same sort of thing. I've always been a little on the effeminate side. I've always been like, well, until I hit middle age and got kind of squishy, I was always like thin as a rail and like really small frame and like had like long beautiful lashes. And I got a lot of people saying things about me being effeminate or whatever. And I remember it really making me mad. And one thing, like you could place it on like, oh, that's because, you were so against being female that it was like pissing you off because, toxic masculinity. And it wasn't that. It was like, maybe part of it was that. But I also kind of feel like it was like the thing I really want that you're now like, oh, you're this thing. And I'm thinking, yeah, no, I'm fucking not. So thanks for bringing that up. Sorry, swearing.
You're fine.
Sorry.
You're fine. I haven't seen any of our younger viewers yet, so you're fine.
And so it was like really frustrating. And I remember being really frustrated at all these sort of like, and.
Oh, there she is. Okay. She's all right. Her mom knows she watches. It's okay.
Okay. So, yeah, so like going on and on, I just realized it was just like this frustration of being like up against this wall of impossibility or perceived impossibility that I can't have that. That is not something that is fated for me. And at some point in my life, I don't know when this was, I just sort of accepted it, right? I just sort of buried these feelings really deep down and just thought, well, I guess this is it. And tried to embrace maledom as best I could.
That brings up a really good question. Okay, so they estimate that the trans population is 1% to 4%, right? Mm-hmm. How many don't identify as trans because they've given up the idea that they could possibly be what they really want to be? Perhaps the number is much higher, but because our society is so good at ingraining the idea of stereotypes and cultural expectations, that the trans community is actually broken down and worn down until they fit into the mold that society expects them to, so sorry, I had to ask that because that sounded like a really good thing to say, so I had to say it.
It was really good.
Thank you. Real quick, Wendy, if you could tell me if your daughter is watching, that would be great. Okay. So, you talk about the impossibility. Now let's follow that up. What do you do how did you manage that impossibility? Because if you feel like something is impossible, the inclination is to just completely crumble in the face of it or to get, to not try at all. So how did you manage to, you accepted it, but did you really? Because you're here now. So where's the dichotomy? What happens between accepting, and very, very big air quotes, accepting, to the lovely woman I have sitting in front of me, sort of?
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this brief because I can be long-winded. All right, so
You have almost an hour, so tell the story.
Okay. So one of the things I do freelance is I write for Pathfinder and Starfinder. That's Paizo's organized play program. It's a tabletop role-playing game. So a lot of people have heard about Dungeons and Dragons. They're the #1 tabletop role-playing game. Pathfinder's #2, Starfinder's #3, and they're by the same company. If you can combine their sales,
you're minor league D&D. I get it.
And that's all the time we have for today, everyone. So I write for them freelance, and I've been writing for them for several years. And at one point, a friend of mine who's transgender, and we'll get into that in a second. So I'm going to put a pin in this story really quick.
What is it?
Obviously,
let me write it down.
I was aware of transgender people, but I didn't think I was transgender. So
Okay.
pin in that, we'll get back to it. But anyway, so she's transgender, and she had posted on Facebook about being really frustrated that there is not as many transgender people represented in our game. And I thought, well, I'm in the middle of writing a really big juicy scenario right now that's one of these big interactive specials that hundreds of people play at once, and it's crazy. It gets a lot of attention. And I'm like, you know what? There's an NPC that's female. There's no reason she can't be a trans lady. There's no reason. So let's just do it. Let's just make her a trans lady. She's this big heroic figure. And I did. So I wrote this character, Meta, for a game, a scenario called The Solstice Scar. And she was very much featured throughout this storyline. And right off the bat, when you meet her, she has a bodyguard, and the bodyguard's oh, it's so-and-so, I forget what the name we came up with, but some in-world fantasy name for being transgender. And, sure enough, so the players can be well, what does that mean? And it's well, that means that she was discovered to be a woman later in life. And it was oh, okay. And I also wrote in some cool things about her powers fall through the female line. It was confusing that she got them because she didn't know or whatever. And so I put all this stuff in there. And because I wanted this to be genuine, as I'm writing it, I talked to my developer at Paizo and said, well, how can I make this really authentic? Is there another transgender author that I can work with? And he said, yes, go work with Isabel Lee, who's another freelancer. So Isabel, and also transgender. And so Isabel's working with me on it. And I'm learning a lot about what it means to be transgender, what the transgender experience is all about and everything. And as I'm writing it, I keep running into these posts. And the one that really, I think, cracked my egg was, we became Facebook friends, and she had a post, and I'll keep it PG-13, so edited for content, that had some picture of some video game character or something. And it said it's one of those situations where I don't know if I want to be her or if I want to date her. And I was that's kind of how I feel. And then I see all of her trans feminine friends on Facebook also posting, oh yeah, I feel the same way. Oh, I get that all the time. Da-da-da. And I'm just I get that all the time. I'm watching some movie or playing some video game, and there's some awesome female character, and it's partially she's really hot, and partially how cool would it be to be this person? And not just because she's saving the world, but also because she's real hot and she's super feminine and owning it and all this stuff. And it's just that would be amazing. And so I started to question. I started to think about it. I talked to another friend of mine who's getting a graduate degree in gender studies and masculinity, and I'm so I was doing that stupid thing, a friend of mine. I'm let's just say there was a person who wasn't upset about their gender necessarily, but also really wanted to be a different gender, but didn't really have dysphoria. Would that person be trans? And they're yeah, they're trans.
I mean, if you have that innate desire, when you look at someone and be oh, I wish I was her, it absolutely is. And it comes down to something that I think inhibits a lot of us from accepting our trans identity, or the fact that we happen to be trans, is the myth of sexuality. The idea that I know for a long time I was but I like girls, so I can't possibly be a girl because I like girls, and it never even occurred to me to put two and two together, and I'm oh, I'm a lesbian. I get it now. Yeah, and so that actually inhibited me for a long time from just being myself, because I was like, well, I'm not this idea that, I don't find any appeal in guys, before my transition. I was none at all. And so, that is a great podcast releasing next month. So we're going to talk about that next month, apparently, in a podcast. Wonderful. Trans women and their podcasts. So, it really slowed us down. So how did your sexuality, because I know you're married, and, happily, I'm assuming, because you're actually going to still be with her, you don't have to, it's so rapturous. I know.
Like, ridiculously happy. You can be jealous. It's okay. It's totally not.
I am. Says the poor little girl over here who doesn't have anybody. I am. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Please don't say it too loud. We don't want the chasers coming. So, if a trans woman says she's single too loudly, it's like a dog whistle for chasers. So,
seriously.
So, let me answer that question. I would like you to answer that question. You don't have to. I mean, yes, you do. Tell me, did your sexuality impede or influence your identity in any way? Because I mean, they're two separate things, but it can certainly have an impact to one on the other.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get a little PG-13, if that's okay.
That's fine. You're fine. We have a 10th grader. We don't have the 7th grader on right now, so you're fine.
Okay. So, yeah, I've always been attracted to women. I've never had any interest in men whatsoever. To the point where I felt really out of touch, I think, sometimes with my own sexuality. Like, I was interested in women, but, my dad liked to say a lot in high school, I didn't date much. In fact, I dated almost not at all in high school. I had, one steady girlfriend for a while, and that was it. And I dated almost not at all in college. I just didn't date much. And part of it was just sort of a disinterest, I think, in my own sexuality, from my own point of view, because I know I'm attracted to women. I absolutely know that for a fact. But I don't really have the drive to go pursue it. And I think a lot of that, reflecting back, was on my own sort of personal view of myself, or just how motivated I was. And now I'm I know what I want. I know who I am, and it's a lot better. And if I go a little PG-13, even just the parts, right? Even just the equipment wasn't anything I was ever interested in. I remember specifically in college talking to some other, dude bros or something in class, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't know, I masturbate every day. I masturbate 8 times a week. I masturbate 12 times a week. And I'm thinking, I don't really... And I'm I don't really masturbate. I don't like doing it. I don't like touching it. I don't like dealing with it. I just basically pretend it's not there.
Just so you know, just so we're clear, that's called dysphoria.
Shit.
There it is. Yeah. You had dysphoria the whole time. There it is.
My God. But it's but it's parts, and so people don't like to say, if you don't like your penis, they don't want to say that, right? I don't know, a lot of places, when I read about it, when I looked into it, people don't mention it in those terms, and so it didn't click with me. And for a long time, I just didn't want to. And I kind of forced myself to do it because you're supposed to. And I mean, it was yep, that's a thing I did because I'm supposed to do it. But I never really liked it. Oh, goodness. Well, now my niece is joining, so I really have to keep it back down to PG, but that's fine.
Is that Genevieve?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, hi.
Don't watch the beginning of it.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Didn't say anything bad. You're fine. Okay. So we're talking about sexuality. Now, after you started your hormone therapy, did you notice any change in desires and things like that?
Oh, sexually?
Yeah.
No. I was still very much interested in women. And one of the things that happens to a lot of gals I know on HRT is just a complete lowering or loss of sex drive. Right. I went from 110% ready to 80% ready, and eventually down to about 60% ready. And then I went on progesterone, and I'm back up to 80%. So,
right. It's also just so we're clear, the effects of lowering libido and lowering sex drive are not permanent. As they drop, they do drop, and I was the same way. I was hypersexual before, and then once I started, the testosterone blockers, I dropped from probably like 120, 130 down to 80, 70, and then I made it down to about 60, maybe about 50. And then, but with time, I've been on HRT for 16 months now, and now I'm back. I'm like, I'm absolutely there. It's like, I'm ready. I don't have anybody to be ready with or for, but I'm ready. So, which is frustrating. So I'm like, it was easier when my libido was down because I didn't have to worry about it. Now I actually think about it and it's a little frustrating. So, okay, so now perhaps your sexuality didn't change, but how about your okay, so if this is the scale, this being totally into women, this being totally into men, I was somewhere over here.
Okay.
After HRT, I ended probably about here. So, I still have no interest in being with a guy, but the idea of it is far less repugnant than before. If that makes sense.
Yes, I could see that making sense. I suppose there was a tiny shift.
Okay.
Really, it went from like 110% interested in women to 110% interested 0% interested in men to 0% interested in men, but I see what you're doing. And I think the biggest change for me, though, was in that sort of like agender, androgynous, non-binary. Prior to HRT, I was like 20%. And now I'm like, I don't know, maybe depends on the person, 50%, who knows? Like, we'll just see. So I'm more interested in that, but I also wonder if it's a cultural thing, being involved in sort of the outside the binary gender spectrum community of going like, oh, okay, there's actually really cool people, and like I'm getting to know them, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're just cool people, like whatever. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think stepping outside of the expectation allows us to be a little more accepting, perhaps. Maybe a little more flexible with our views. We're not, we've already stepped outside the box. Now we can look at the box wherever we want. So, we can look at the side of the box, we can look under the box, we can be on top of the box, notice the bottom of the box and top of the box are in that thing.
I don't want to get into top and bottom again. That's just,
that's as close as I was getting. You're the one talking about top and bottom. I'm talking about a box.
Uh-huh.
So, all right, let's go back to the awareness of trans people, but, the pin. We're back at the pin.
Oh, yeah, okay. So interesting thing. So maybe a year or so before, maybe 2 years, I'm not sure exactly how long, but a decent amount of time before I started doing research on this character, I had a friend who was, I was friends with in society, and she came out as trans. And I remember being like, oh, wait, what now? So I stopped and I did some research, and I remember that a lot of what I was reading were things like, assigned male at birth, but is really a woman and changes their gender and blah, 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 and all the stuff you read. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. But then you read this overwhelming false narrative of, I've always known since I was a little kid. And as soon as I read that for like the umpteenth time, it was just like, oh, well, obviously I'm not trans.
Right.
Even though my interest was piqued a little bit, because I don't know, a lot of time that happens where people are like, hypochondria, and you're like, I'm a hypochondriac, or am I?
Right.
So I was reading about it.
You're retconning your past. You're retconning your understanding of being trans.
Right, so I was like, I don't know, you do that a little bit, and I was like, yeah, but that's not me. Like, I didn't know ever since I was a little kid that I'm really a woman, and like, just my parts don't all match. I didn't know that. So I'm like, oh, that doesn't really match me. And like, the narrative that they spin is such this like narrow, single-minded this is what it means to be transgender. What it means to be is that when you're 5, you're like, hey, Ma, I'm a girl. And she's like, no, you're not. And you knew the whole time. And you were just waiting for your chick. Like, that's not me.
Right. I would like to recommend a book here real quick. Transgressive. It's available on Amazon. The author is a trans woman here on Instagram. Goes by the title of Trans Philosopher.
Okay.
Absolutely, she attacks this problem directly. She talks about her experience being the I didn't always know experience, as opposed to compared to the I always knew. For me, I mean, I was born with the understanding that I didn't feel right, and I did think okay, we're going to get a little PG-13 here for a second, folks. So, all right, so I'm going to speak as medically as I can so it doesn't sound gross. Across the perineum, that's the place between the scrotum and the anus, is a seam. Is a seam of skin, and every person born with these parts will understand what I'm talking about. When I was little, I actually thought they sewed up my vagina. So, go figure. Yeah. So I think I always knew.
Yeah.
I think I always knew. I didn't have the language. And I think a lot of that comes down to that too. So, yeah. All right. Vanessa, I'm sorry I interrupted. I took your wind.
Oh my gosh, wind goddesses. Thank you, friends. All right, even though it's a really homophobic show, but I digress. So, so I just
She-Ra.
Love She-Ra. So I also digress. Story for another time.
Absolutely.
Maybe after this. All right, so no, I've lost it. Oh.
So you were talking about the awareness of being trans and the myth of being aware of your transness from the beginning,
right.
And how you were like, that didn't fit, so...
It didn't fit. And until I had talked to my friend who was getting her... until I talked to my friend and found out about, you can be trans and not have dysphoria, and even though I really did and just didn't realize it, it didn't occur to me that this was a thing that was possible. And so once that happened, I started doing a lot more self-reflection. I started doing a lot more thinking about it, and it still took me a good, 6 months or something of just self-reflection before finally accepting it myself. That okay, whether I transition or not, this is a thing that is true about me. And just that simple fact took me a good 6 months. Of course, I'm in my late 30s, so there you go.
Sorry, getting rid of the riffraff. So,
yeah,
I would like to say something that's probably going to get me to lose a few followers. The idea, and this, let me finish before you jump all over me. The idea that you can be trans without dysphoria, I perfectly agree with, but not just because, you can. It's more complicated than that. My problem with this is dysphoria is so personal. It is so internalized that trying to put a clear and concise border around it and definition around it is so completely impossible that nobody could define dysphoria enough to be able to show when it's enough to be trans. So I think there is always an element. I think there's always an element of dysphoria involved with being trans, because if you were perfectly happy being male, you would still be male. That's dysphoria, folks. So why, if I'm not happy being male, I don't have to loathe every part of my being. But,
sure.
I kind of did. So, but.
Yeah, and I didn't. So I see where you're going. And I think that transition can be completely gender euphoria based and not dysphoria based, and I think that's
true
fun.
Too. I think honestly, I would probably go with that as a better definite description of me. But yeah. I agree.
Okay, so I've gone to this before, but I'm going to do it again. So I kind of see if we're looking at gender and how we feel about ourselves from a binary perspective, right? So this theory, this whatever, doesn't apply to non-binary people exactly, although I have other side branching theories. So if we start with a baseline, And one side is how do I feel about being female and how do I feel about being male. For me, when I would think about myself, I would think male, sure, I don't care. No, just like I didn't hate it. No,
Okay.
maybe a tiny bit. Not that bad, but no deal. But being female would be super cool. It's a euphoria-based transition because it's like I don't really have that much dysphoria.
Right.
I do now, but also because I'm doing so well here that I
Right.
notice all the maleness and I'm like, oh, go away. But
And I
like
think-
for most of my life, it was this way.
And I think, I think that's basic. We're basically saying the same thing. I'm wording it differently, I think, because, it's, it's all different. I may not be miserable. I may not, but I'm not, I'd much rather not stay here. I mean,
Sure.
if I absolutely had to, I would function, but I'm not going to do as well as I function now. I mean, goodness gracious. If you look at all the things that I've accomplished in the last 2 months since accepting myself and just owning myself.
Yeah.
I've accomplished so much more than my male alter ego, pathetic little Clark Kent wannabe could have ever done. So, okay. So let's move on. I want to get back to you. So let me ask you, did you transitioned after being with your wife, obviously?
Yes.
So tell me about it. How did that go? First off, how did you know it was time that you had to deal with this? Since we're talking about gender euphoria and there's no circumstances that are forcing you to do this, why did you choose to do this? This is not an easy thing to do.
It became an imperative for me, such to the point where I fully admit I came out to my wife on a very bad time when all she wanted to do was have a discussion about emotional labor and who's doing what around the house to keep our lives intact and stuff and all that. And it was a very whatever thing. But it was a very serious talk. And I also just it was I figured this out about myself and I really want to tell you and I don't know how and I don't know when and I don't know how to bring it up and be like, so
it's just female.
Yeah, so hey, can we talk about gender? It would just be weird, right? Now it's not because all this, but at the time it'd just be weird. And so we were having this really serious heart-to-heart conversation. We were just being really open and honest and discussing problems and whatever. It also happened to be right before she went on a week-long trip. And I just told her what was up with me, and we were up for a long time, and it was really hard because we have been, now we've been together for 13 years, married for 11.
Okay.
But at the time it was, I don't know what, a year and a half ago. So we had over a decade of history, and then all of a sudden it's so I'm transgender. And I don't know what that means for me, and I don't know if I'm transitioning, but I'm just I figured this out, and I wanted to tell you. Right before she leaves for a week-long trip that's essentially a business trip for her because she's an academic and she's going to an academic conference, and it's I screwed up that trip. So that was really shitty.
That was kind of a bitchy move.
It was really bad. It was really bad.
The imperative of the moment, I don't fault you for it. Sometimes things need to be discussed. They need to be discussed when they're discussed. For whatever reason, you were, your inner self was screaming, talk about it, so, and despite the bumpy road, it seems like you two have at least gotten through that part of it, right?
We're doing great. So for us, it was rocky for a month or two. There was easily 6 to 8 weeks where it was just I don't know where this is going, and it was really touchy about so do you want me to use different pronouns? And I'm I'm not ready for that. Do you want me to use a different name? Have you picked a name? I haven't picked a name. And it was just really bumpy for a couple months. But it got to the point where it was okay, she had sort of adjusted, and there was definitely a grieving period for her that she's possibly still going through for, the man she married, who's no longer the man she married. And I get that. And, our wedding pictures are still up, and it doesn't bother me. Seeing it's I still have my wedding ring. It's a very masculine ring because that's the one that she gave me when we got married, and that's the one I'm going to wear until she gives me a replacement. So This is it.
Until she gives you a diamond. You're going to make her buy you a diamond?
I'm not going to make her buy me anything. We talked about getting married again, like having another ceremony so I can wear a wedding dress, because that would be fun. And, maybe I'll get a ring then. Yes.
We all have it's funny is I'm like, the only reason I would even want to get married again is not because I want to go through the whole contract part of it, but I really want to wear a wedding dress. And not just because I'm wearing a wedding dress. I want to wear a wedding dress on my wedding day. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about it, and she was like, absolutely not getting married again. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, honestly, I don't want to either, because the whole contractual obligation of being married sucks. But, and this is coming from divorced women, so please understand.
Sure.
But I'm like, what sounds nice is a commitment ceremony. I would love to stand up in front of my friends and family and tell them that this is my person and I'm going to spend my life with them. I don't need a sheet of paper to tell me, and I don't need the state to tell me. I don't need some God to tell me. Sorry for those of you who are religious. I'm kind of going through an anti-religious phase right now, and that's as far as I'm going with it. But I don't need somebody to tell me. I can make my own promises to the person that I love. And, if they'll have me, and then I want to make that promise to them. So, plus I want to wear a wedding dress. Come on.
Yeah.
Because.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I see what you're saying.
Real quick, Hannah, I understand. You're blessed, so it's very nice for you. Not all of us are in a position where we have a person who, looks at us and gets all dewy-eyed. That's how it works. Okay, so your wife is understanding. Your wife is understanding. How is she with the change, though? Because, we're talking about a sexual identity change. So
one thing that I guess I lucked out on, or maybe she did, or both, is she is bisexual, and she had accepted that about herself slightly prior, right? I forget if it was like 1 or 2 years. It wasn't like forever ago, but it was relatively recent, within the last handful of years, and she had accepted that about herself. And she wasn't really out because we had a very hetero-looking marriage. And we are monogamous, and so there's not really any chance at this point in her life for her to be with a woman.
But so that does not diminish her bisexuality.
But it doesn't diminish, exactly. So it took a period of adjustment, and I remember her saying things to me like, I might not be attracted to you after you transition. Like, even though I'm bisexual, just throwing that out there, if you decide to transition, I might not be attracted to you anymore. And I said, I get that.
It's lucky you turned out so good looking then, because I think this whole thing is working for you. Okay, so let's move off of relationships. Let's start talking about your process of getting HRT and starting down this journey. These are not simple steps. These take effort, folks. Now, I know 99% of my audience are trans individuals. But we do have 1 to 2%. And getting started on this is so challenging. So let me ask, how did that look for you? How did you make that work for yourself?
Well, one thing that is lucky about being in Pennsylvania at the moment is Pennsylvania is an informed consent state. So all I really had to do, is go to my primary care physician and say, I am trans and I would like to start my medical transition. And they said, okay, have you seen a therapist? And I think that was more or less just, are you sure? Like part of the are you sure process,
right?
Which is a little bit gatekeeping, but knowing my physician that I do now, I understand it was more or less just like, hey, make sure you talk to somebody first, because she is basically not allowed to gatekeep other than saying, here's a giant packet of information, sign that you've read it, and I'll give you a prescription.
But at the same time, a caring, nurturing practitioner is going to want to make sure that you're in the right mind space. They're not trying to stop you. If you say, no, but I'm ready to do this, absolutely, come on, let's do it. But I care about you. I want to make sure you're healthy and well. And this is a big step. So I can see that it could be viewed as great gatekeeping, but at the same time, it might just be concern from from somebody whose responsibility is to make sure you're well. So.
Yeah, and as I got to know this physician better, like I really understand that is the point she was coming across, was just making sure that if she was taking care of my biochemical needs for transition, that there was someone there to take care of my mental needs for transition, because it is an adjustment. And I was seeing a therapist kind of on an as needed basis, because my insurance doesn't really cover it. It's like, sure, we'll pay for it, but your copay is super high. So I was seeing one on an as needed basis every 2 or 3 months, usually when big events would happen. Either right before, right after, or both. And I just had to sort of go through it. The good news is my medical insurance covered it. Covers like basic HRT, nothing else, but they cover basic HRT, so that portion was pretty easy for me.
Okay. All right. I want to answer this comment, Jalen. Especially challenging when you had no insurance at the time. Or when you have insurance and your insurance specifically excludes transgender care. That is currently my situation. Yes, it is incredibly difficult. I would recommend finding your local Planned Parenthood clinic. They all do informed consent, I believe. And even though
legally allowed to in your state.
Right. If they're legally allowed to, right. I do know there has been a slight increase in fees due to budget cutbacks for Planned Parenthood. Thank you for that, Mr. President. So, it's not easy, but there are some wonderful people in there. So I'm just going to take over real quick. So today I went for supposed to be my last HRT visit in South Carolina. They raised the rates. I've been paying bills and things like that in preparation for my move at the end of the month. So I was expecting this bill. When it was this bill, I was expecting this bill. When it was this bill, I didn't have enough. So the nurse practitioner who's in charge of the clinic and in charge of transgender care there, I'm getting ready to walk out. They were so nice. They gave me an appointment next week, even though there was no time available for it. And Stacy, the nurse practitioner at the Planned Parenthood in Charleston, I asked her, she said I could say her name. She is an amazing person. She actually, as I was about to walk out, she actually came running out. She's like, no, you can't leave. I want to talk to you. So we went back in her office, and even though it wasn't a medical visit, I wasn't being billed for it. She wasn't getting anything for it, for Planned Parenthood. She was making sure I was okay. So, that's the kind of thing you can really expect. I'm sure it's not true of everybody, but here that is been the one bright shining star in my transition in South Carolina was my relationship with my nurse practitioner. Because otherwise, it's a big ball of suck, folks. So, all right, Vanessa. So we have now, you've got all this started.
Yep.
But where do you see yourself going, though? I mean, are you happy with what you got there? Because
New York.
I know you're going to New York. I'm not talking about physically. I am talking about physically, but I'm not talking about spatially speaking here. I'm talking about your desires for yourself. Now, again, these are very personal questions, and I would never ask them of somebody that I didn't know, folks. Don't go up to any just transgender person and say, what are you going to do with yourself? That's none of your business. I'm offering Vanessa the opportunity to share if she feels like it. Please keep that in mind.
Sure. And I feel comfortable sharing some stuff.
Yeah, obviously, I wouldn't expect all of it. Please don't share all of it. We would have to rate this a different level.
Yeah. So, I at one point was really concerned about facial feminization surgery and passing and all that. I am less concerned with passing, but also I feel like I passed pretty well. Right. And those are probably unfortunately related, but I also want to see a world where passing doesn't matter. So I am kind of conflicted. And so because of that, I am at the point where I have a little bit of a brow ridge, but it's not terrible, and I kind of wanted to get rid of it. I'm like, I need facial feminization surgery. I am now at the point where I don't necessarily feel that I need that, but I do have one droopy eye that I work really hard to make sure it's not droopy, especially when I'm in camera.
Okay, so everybody look down at your scroll. Jace McGrady just joined. Oh my
Hi,
goodness.
Jake.
And I'm sorry, Jace, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I'm just going by the fact that it's Jas. This wonderful individual created a piece of artwork of me. And if you go and follow them now, you can see it. It is so stunning, so exquisitely stunning that I can't possibly express how flattered and humbled I am that somebody would take the time to create such a beautiful piece of work of this. I'm like, I don't even like looking at it in the mirror, but for some odd reason, I can look at that picture and just be like, oh my God. So, okay. Jen, so gorgeous, so impressed. Absolutely. Go follow right now. Go follow right now because they need all the followers.
I'm in the middle of a live stream. I can't follow right now.
Okay, write it down so everybody can follow it later. Okay. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I had to absolutely do that. So.
No, it's fine. Okay. I'm writing it down. I have my pink pen and everything.
It's JASMCGRADY. All the followers. We're going to get you all the followers. Now, Jace does have a private page that is perfectly within their rights. So we're going to keep them busy. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's get back to transfiguration. Oh, that's the other thing. It's her fault that it's called transfiguration. It's Vanessa's fault that it's called transfiguration. It was going to be transfigures. She threw the nation on the end, and I think it's the better for it. So
because I'm a Harry Potter nerd, and I thought it sounded like transfiguration.
Well, transfigures is the same thing. So
I know.
Yours is better. Well, I get it. Yours is better.
Well, no, I was thinking that if I was in Harry Potter land, I would want to specialize in transfiguration so I could make my body the way I wanted it to look.
Obviously. I'd have polyjuice potion all the time. Okay.
That is a subject for another live when I have had more to drink. All right, so
let's get back to where you see yourself going.
Yeah, so I kind of feel like I don't necessarily need FFS. I do have a droopy eyelid that drives me crazy and gives me so much eyeliner transfer. I just want to cry. I would love to fix that.
Couldn't a droopy eyelid be considered a medical necessity anyway?
No, only if it obstructs your vision, which it doesn't.
So get a doctor who's going to say it obstructs your vision.
I'm just going to cross that bridge later or never. I'm not worried about it. So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But like, I feel pretty happy with how I look. Like, I'm pretty pleased with it. I at one point was worried about breast augmentation, and I'm like, I have like the 40-inch rib cage band, and it's big, and I know some girls have even wider rib cages, and it's just like, what am I gonna do? But then I was lucky enough, I found a bra, Pepper brand bra, which I don't sell and I don't get any money for, but like I love them so much.
Right.
I bought one because they make bras exclusively for women with small chests, and they had an equivalent of a 48 size. It's one of those like small, medium, large ones. So I think it's the extra large, covers 40A. So I went ahead and bought it. And lo and behold, it is the first real bra that fits. And so,
we're gonna plug them now. We're gonna plug them. It's Pepper bra, right?
Pepper.
Pepper.
I love Pepper.
Pepper and bra.
Yeah, they're amazing. So they, so I bought this thing and I went on their website on Facebook and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love your bra so much. The owners, Leah and Jacqueline, contacted me and were like, can we have a discussion with you? And I was like, sure. So we had a little like video Skype type interview and talked all about bras and transgender women and the sort of the struggles that a lot of us face, trans feminine people. And it was really informative and wonderful. And afterwards, they're like, hey, would you mind if we either used what you had written, which was really just a fan rant, or like write a statement and like send a picture of yourself in the product? Would you mind that? And then, we could use it in our advertising if you want, because their advertising is like partially models, but also partially just people that love the product that are like, oh my gosh, this is the best. So I was like, well, I guess I could. You want a picture of me with my shirt off? Like, I don't know. It took me several weeks of like thinking about it and really just sort of getting to the point where I was like, okay, maybe I'll take the picture. And I remember one day I got ready for work in the morning and I was wearing like a button-up shirt and I was like, well, Okay, so I unbuttoned the shirt. Like, I'm already all dolled up. And I unbuttoned the shirt and I just sort of like posed and I took 2 or 3 selfies and I went ahead and sent it off to them and they were thrilled. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. But it still took me like a week or so to like build up the nerve to send this picture. And then like a month or so later, they sent like my ad popped up. Like someone saw it and it was like, I'm in an advertisement. It's me with my shirt.
Advertising. You're a model. Too bad you didn't get paid. You could say you're a professional model.
I'm not professional. I don't get paid anything. I've never received a dollar from them. But I'm like, gosh, that's so great. And so it's very, very empowering. And so, like, a lot of the things that are happening, really the only thing I think I want to get done is bottom surgery because I don't like my penis. And that's it.
I get it.
I'm real happy.
You know, it's funny. It's funny, as I talk about this all the time. I talk about this all the time because it's true. As you start to transition, as you start to your hormone therapy, the desires that you want change. You know, I was originally okay with, you know, just taking hormones and seeing what happened. I wanted a tracheal shave because I have a ginormous Adam's apple. But I didn't want vocal feminization surgery because I have almost a 3 1/4 octave range in my singing voice. And I don't want to lose my bottom register. Screw that. No. But now that I've been on hormones for coming on 1.5 years now, I realize I'm like, no, all of that was the old me, you know, was this person who was trying to cling to a past that never actually existed. And so now I'm right in the same boat with you. And hopefully with my move to Phoenix, the Phoenix School District, if I can get on board, they have trans insurance. So that's going to be good. Okay, so talk to me about where you see yourself, because we only have about 7 minutes left. Talk to me about where you see yourself going. And I have to say, this one went by quick. So well, we both do. That's why I do these. Oh, I'm sorry, Emily. Oh, Emily can attest to how amazing Stacy is, because Emily is actually here in the Charleston area and goes to the same Planned Parenthood. And also, her appointment is on Wednesday next week, which is funny because it's the day after my appointment. So sad. Never met her in real life, but we live in the same city apparently. And it's only just now that I'm leaving that I find this out. Go figure. So, I was saying something. What projects do you want to see? What would you like to accomplish? If you could do anything at all, if you were given whatever amount of money to do whatever, yes, Pride is Saturday, but I'm busy.
Like trans-specific goals? Like in
general, yeah.
Type goals? I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun on Instagram. I think it's really nice to talk to other people. I feel guilty sometimes because honestly, my transition has gone really, really well. And sometimes that makes me feel guilt in the community. But then...
So when you hear me tell my stories, you tend to get cringed.
I just feel so guilty. But then here's the thing. I also realize there's a lot of people out there who are really afraid that the worst is going to happen. There's a lot of people out there that are just like, oh my gosh, all these bad things are going to happen. I thought several bad things are going to happen, and I've been very lucky. But what that shows, I'm hoping to other people, is that it's not always horrible. It's not always bad. Transition doesn't automatically... Yeah, it doesn't automatically mean losing your spouse. It doesn't automatically mean losing your family. It doesn't automatically mean losing your job. It doesn't automatically mean losing your family. It might. There are those risks.
And I would like to add to that. Yes, it is possible that it might happen. But if it does, it doesn't have to be the end of your world.
Yeah.
You know, look at me. I mean, for goodness sake, look at me. You know, I've lost everything. I haven't lost my job, but that's not because they don't want to get rid of me. It's because they're afraid to get rid of me because I stopped letting them push me around.
Sure.
I've lost everything. But at the same time, I have found myself. I have found friends who understand me better than almost anyone who has ever understood me. I found somebody who looks at me and says the words, "You are gorgeous." I've never felt more seen, more accepted, and more beautiful than that moment.
Yeah.
And it has changed my life. So just because the road is bad doesn't mean you shouldn't travel it. You can still get to where you're going, even if it's a little bumpy along the way. It's a lot of it has to do with how you feel about yourself and how you feel like, you know, how much you give how much hope, how much positive energy you put out there. So, all right.
And I mean, I've had my share of losses. They're not as dramatic as all that. Like, I've lost my best friend. I've lost some other friends. I have some family members that don't talk to me anymore. Like, not my closest family, thank goodness. But I do have, like, cousins and things that just stopped responding to anything on Facebook and stopped liking my posts and just stopped interacting altogether. They didn't unfriend me for the most part, but they just stopped. They just decided that maybe they don't need to interact with me anymore.
Okay.
And it's tough.
Vanessa, we're going to bring you back for another interview. Not tonight, though, because I'm exhausted. I would like to schedule a follow-up interview with you because we still have so much that we didn't even approach. And we didn't talk about family. We didn't talk about any of this stuff. This one was good. I mean, they've all been really good, but Vanessa, you're a talker, and we could go all day. So, but we do only have 2 minutes left, so let us end here on
Okay.
Would you like to say anything to our audience? What would you nice and quick, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay. Just go out there and do your best. And other people's opinions really don't matter as much as your own towards yourself. And as long as you have the confidence to keep going, that confidence will show in everything you do. And the only other thing I wanted to say was, if you want to keep chatting with me, I'll probably go live right after this.
Okay. I would like to say this. There's only one person who can stand in your way and actually be successful. And they're the person who's standing in front of the mirror when you look into it. So never let yourself stand in your own way if you can help it. I understand we have dysphoria. I understand we have so many challenges and so much of this we put in front of ourselves. But the reality is that it's up to you to make this happen. Even if you can't be visible, be yourself anyway. So thank you so much for watching Transfiguration tonight. We will definitely bring Vanessa back for another show. And once we have it, I will publish it. This will be posted on my YouTube channel, which is available in my link. And that should be up by tomorrow morning. It's a little tricky, so, because recording live is a challenge. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others, but always be yourself in front of others. Thank you so much, folks. Have a great night. We'll see you again tomorrow at 5:30 when we interview Jess from the UK. That's why it's so early, because it's not so early there. I've had a great time tonight, despite, a night where I just kind of wanted to crawl into bed and not exist anymore. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for joining me. Good night, everybody.
Night.